Hi, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create floating and interactive images in Thrive Architect. This request came from a Facebook group where somebody was asking how to make an image that looks like the one you find on AccuRanker.com, where you have this base image and then on top of it are these little icons that are floating and have this somewhat turning animation, or this like 3D turn effect. You don't need to know JavaScript. You definitely do not need any plugins. All you need is Thrive Architect. I have a link to that in the blog description, in the description of this video, if you need Thrive Architect. So let's just jump right in and take a look at everything that you need to make this happen. So here we go. This is a version on my website that I made using Thrive Architect. I didn't make all the little images for the sake of this demo. I just added 3 of them. But if we bounce back and forth, you can see that it does essentially the exact same thing. As you hover over the icons, they turn. They, in fact, do the exact turn effect because I just took the CSS from their website. And you can make this in Thrive Architect. Let's take a look at how I did that. Okay, so here we are in Thrive Architect. All you have to do is first, let's go ahead and take a look at this piece by piece, and then we'll break it down and we'll do it for you from scratch. So first, you're going to add a content box. I like to put everything inside of a content box because it allows you to save things as a template later, and it just keeps everything nice and contained, and you can do some sizing options for it. So put a content box in, and then inside that content box we have an image. In this example, it's the orange box with the people around it. And then the next step will be to add our images inside of their own content box. If I hover over this image, for example, and I go to the breadcrumbs and I click on the content box that this image is in, you'll notice that it's floating. So I'm going to explain that in just a minute, and in my blog post I go into detail as well. But essentially, each of these images are inside of their own content box, and their content box is inside the original content box. And this is the magical piece that makes it all happen, this custom HTML element, where we just put in this simple CSS code that I've provided for you that you can just cut and paste and then tweak. So let's make this from scratch. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is add a content box. Next thing that we want to do is add that base image, so I'm going to drag in an image. So here's our image. We can resize it to be whatever we want. The next thing that we want to do is to get each of these images inside their own content box like I mentioned. So we're going to add 3 more content boxes. And I like to put them right above the image. So there's 1, duplicate, duplicate, 2, 3. There are our 3 content boxes. And real quick, before you duplicate the original, this just helps a little bit later. I like to remove all of the extra margin and padding from that. That way when I duplicate it, it takes up less space, and for the sake of this, again, less space is better. Okay, so now we're going to add our 3 images. I'm going to add an image element into each of these, and we're going to grab our image 1, duplicate that. We'll get each of these in here, and then we can just change out the images to be what we want them to be. Great. Okay, now the next step is going to be to put these images where we want them to be on our background image. We can do that with layout and position. Go to absolute position, and then from there choose the corner that you want it to go into. You can just choose the first one, the top left, and now we just adjust the left and top positions until we get them approximately where we want them to be. Remember, you may want to tweak this a little bit later because as well, because they're going to be bobbing up and down with that float animation. So this is just to get them in their general position from which we can work with them later. All right, almost done. Okay, that's good enough for now. Now we're going to add in the custom HTML. So we will find the custom HTML attribute. Put this anywhere on the page. I put it just below the image itself, and we'll close that out. Now this is the code that you're going to need right here. I'm going to cut and paste it, and then I'm going to place it inside my custom HTML attribute here. Let's go through this real fast. First off, wrapping it in a style so that it doesn't think it's HTML, it thinks it's a style sheet. Next, this is the keyframe float variable where we define what we're doing with the float animation, how much it's floating, where it's going, what that bounce is. So we're starting at 0. When it reaches 50% of the animation, we want it to be 20 pixels, and then when it reaches the end, it's back where it began. I am not a CSS expert. Essentially, I had to learn this through CSStricks.com and a bunch of these other websites. But essentially, this is where we're moving on the y-axis and how far, and the duration of the animation. Tweak these to your desire, whatever you want to do to get that bouncing to look right for you. And the next variables here, we're defining our float class. I called them floaty 1, 2, and 3. Each of these are for our images. So in our example, we had those 3 circles. Each of those circles is floaty 1, floaty 2, and floaty 3. And you'll notice that I have defined different float animation durations, as well as a delay for them to start. That's because you'll notice in that example, each of those circles is kind of feels like they're moving independently of the others and they're not synchronized. Well, that's because I have them staggered in their start times and how long it takes them to complete the animation. Okay, next is what I call the tourney, right? That's the little hover turn effect. The tourney effect is basically, it takes half a second for them to ease in and out of that transition. The transform, you'll notice that in the example, each of the images is kind of tweaked a little 40 degrees on a 3D axis. That's what we have here, and then when you hover over them, all it does is it puts them back at their normal state. We're basically undoing that 3D turn. And that's it. Close it with the style tag. So this is in the blog post. Feel free to visit it and cut and paste. And once we have that in here, the next step is to go to each of our images and their associated content boxes and give them these classes. So this we're going to make the tourney class, and you'll notice that now it is effectively already turning. Sometimes, I will say, sometimes you will have to save your work and refresh your page in order for these to render properly. That was happening to me while I made this tutorial sometimes. Sometimes not. Okay, so each of them now has the tourney effect. They're working great. Let's go to the content box for each of them and apply the floaty, or the proper floaty class. So you remember this one is floaty 1, this one here, and you'll notice they start to turn. Yeah, let's go to the content box and make this one floaty 2. And let's go to our last guy's content box here and make that one floaty 3. So now they should all be floating. You will notice that they seem to be floating and appearing behind the original image. You can fix that real quick by simply clicking on the content box that they're in and going to layout and position and setting a z-axis of 99. And for each of their content boxes, just go in there and set it for 99 or 98, whatever needs to make that image. And if in this example, you'll notice that my my G for Google fell behind the orange, so I may want to just move this a little bit and grab this one, adjust it, and we'll make this one 97 just for fun. That's basically saying that we want them to be in front of, on the z-axis, which is like that 3D in and out, on top. So there we go. That literally is all there is to it to create a floating, animated, or interactive image in Thrive Architect. We did nothing but use Thrive Architect's own elements and a little bit of CSS that wasn't too hard to figure out. Now, one final thing I will say on this video that I think is really cool. Because we used Thrive Architect and we used these as image elements, guess what? You can affect them in any way that you would an image element. If I wanted to turn this into a link, I could. I could simply click add a link to image, and now this is an interactive link. If I wanted to add a hover effect, all I have to do is up here on the left, go to hover, and I can, if we were to hover over it, turn it gray or give it an action. We can literally do whatever we want to these images, which is fantastic. Really saves you a lot of time instead of having to know CSS. Okay, so that's it. That's all you need to know. Get out there and make your own interactive / quasi-animated images using Thrive Architect. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment on this video or on the blog post that I'll link in the video description. My name's Doug from Convology.com, where I make tutorials about Thrive Architect and all the other Thrive plugins and tools.